So this is my 2009 X5 35D M Sport automatic. I don't think you can get a manual one actually. Anyway, this is what it is, and it's also a 7-seater. Count the headrests. With I'm not sure if this was an individual interior colouring, but it's certainly an unusual one. It's I kind of I do like it. It's not quite right in some way, but I do like it. Although it is actually an M Sport, and although it's got the privacy glass in the back, and it's actually got blinds and all this, but that's all to do with the inside. But the it does have just the brushed aluminium, not chrome, but brushed aluminium trim around there, which that's what is very popular, is to have it gloss black. I was even thinking it'd be quite nice in body colour, which is carbon black. Which is basically like carbon paper, you know. It's dark blue really. It looks black under some lighting conditions. Anyway, it's got what tends to be called staggered alloys. Staggered just basically meaning that the rears are wider than the front. Now, it probably could mean that the fronts are wider than the rear, but I think maybe a Morgan, an old three-wheeler Morgan might be like that, but I don't think there are, other than that, too many other cars in history that have had wider front wheels than rear ones, except for perhaps comical value. But anyway, or maybe a Steamroller. Steamroller would definitely fall in that category of having staggered, maybe not alloys, staggered wheels, where the front's wider. But I suppose Steamroller is probably also technically a three-wheeler too. Anyway, so yeah, so that's what this is. So 35D, what that basically means, at the time, like this is 2009, 2010, there was a little sort of facelift. But at the time, the 35D was the actually, I think it was the quickest diesel, because basically it's a twin turbo instead of a single turbo. So the 30D would have a single turbo, the 35D have a twin turbo. Later on, I think they dropped the 35D and went for a 40D, which just had a little bit more power. This puts out, I think, 286. Don't know what the torque figures are, I can't actually remember. But I can tell you that it does have turbo lag, even though it is a twin turbo. But if you're really in a hurry, if you leave it in sport, it sits where it should sit in terms of revs, to be on the sort of turbo the whole time. But you can't really drive it very smoothly in sport, because the throttle response is just a bit like a bucking Bronco. Anyway, then of course there was the M50D, which was a triple turbo and just touching 400 horsepower, 396, 400, depending on how you count them and where you read. But the 0 to 60 on this was, or is, 7 seconds. Top speed, I think 144, 6 or 8. I can't remember exactly. But that's yeah, so that's that. So the 40D was about 6.7 seconds, because it had about 306 or 316 horsepower, I think. And basically probably a little bit more torque. there are people around who get this 0 to 60 apparently down to around about 5.5 seconds by binning all of the emissions stuff and remapping. Just a general remap would improve things greatly, but if you bin all the emissions stuff, you need to let the ECU know that that's no longer there. So, but it will give you more power and torque as well. The M50D, which they didn't make until after this model, after the I don't know what year, maybe, I don't think it was 2010, maybe it was 11 or 12. It's still this shape, but the slightly facelifted ones. And basically that's around about 5.3 or 5.4 or something to 60. Obviously the whole reason for 0 to 60 time is 0 to 100 kilometers, so it's actually 62.6. That's why you sometimes see figures that are a couple of tenths different, depending on if they measure in 0 to 60 or 0 to 62.6. So anyway, yeah, the M50D was about 5.4 seconds, something like that, 5.3. Interestingly, in the next shape, it was about the same. Was it the F15, I think it's called? It's about the same 0 to 60 time on the M50D, but the 40D is quoted at something like 5.7, might be 5.9, but definitely 5 point something. It's not a lot, you know, so it gets a lot quicker, the 40D on the next shape. Whenever that was, about 2013, I think. And that was, yeah, I'm not really sure why. I'm thinking there's two reasons for it, I would imagine. Obviously, maybe the power and torque characteristics, where that power and torque is coming, because I don't think there was a great deal more power, but it was probably a lot lower down or a lot flatter sort of torque curve or whatever. But I think as well, maybe, I know it got the 8-speed, but so did the later ones of these. But it might have had slightly less transmission drag or something for whatever reason. Maybe some changes to the X drive or something. Not really sure. I mean, the F15 was based upon this chassis anyway, so actually it was like 2010, there was a really minor looking facelift, but anybody who's got a 2009, one of these, including myself, want a 2010 because a couple of things which I'll get into in a sec, but the F15 really was kind of like a rebodied, you know, rather than a completely new model. It was still on the same chassis. There are some people, I think, that have changed this, like the seats apparently straight swap. How much of these things are a straight swap when you really get into it? I've just had my car in the garage for about 5 weeks because the broken spring on the suspension, coil spring, was not a straight swap. There were so many different ones. They managed to get the wrong one 4 times, and eventually I had to wait for it to be airlifted out of Almania, Germany. So anyway, yeah, that's about it really with the, I think just to sort of cover off what were the changes on the 2010 models externally. The most noticeable thing, and you have to be eagle-eyed to spot it, is that these lights, rear lights, are different, and noticeably the thickness of this reversing light is about halved. And possibly where the lights were in relation to each other might be different. In other words, I'm not sure if the indicators came up one or not really sure. But that was one thing. I think I should have checked, shouldn't I? But I think it may have been. Some people say that if you look here, the wing goes all the way around the front, and it's part of the bumper, or a certain part of the bumper, and I think apparently that joins somewhere down here, maybe on the facelift. So there's probably a slight difference with the lights as well. I need to work out how to mosaic out number plates. People do it for cloning reasons, which is probably more important than ever these days, as you're watched everywhere you go, and your mileage will be calculated. Apparently, that's where we're heading. But that's why I'm just keeping my number plates out there, because then I haven't got to bother editing it. So apologies for that. But yeah, so I think, what was there, one other, may have been one other thing on a 2010 externally, that is. The big thing is internally, and in the UK we've always called them facelifts, but it seems that BMW forced us, probably through America, to call them LCI. LCI, lifestyle impulse. How does that work? LCI. Anyway, basically that feeling you get where you think it's time to just freshen a model up, but it seems very much like a marketing thing, really. Just it's a bit like when you get a salesman from a or marketing men from a, you know, speak to the marketing, you know, head of marketing for BMW Europe or something, and when they start, they drop the, so they'll be like, the thing is with X5, it's like, no, with the X5, you know. So I think from the same mind that gave you drop the to add sophistication and a sense of awe, probably the same minds invented this LCI. Life cycle impulse, there we go, that's what it is, I just remembered now. Anyway, but yeah, you barely notice it. It is, different people have had different levels of success with swapping out the rear lights. I had a 5 Series E39 for a long time, 20 years, before I had this, and that was quite a, although again the facelift was quite subtle. The grille just, rather than being sunk into the bonnet, it sort of sat on its where the vents are. It sort of sat on it, is the best way to describe it. That was noticeable subtly. But the big thing with those was the thing that started it all with these lights that we have these days, was the angel eyes, you know, the halo or the smoke rings. Like Gandalf, was it in Lord, or was it no, it was Dumbledore, wasn't it, that blew a smoke ring and then blew a galleon that sailed through the smoke ring or something. Yeah, it reminds me of that scene in whatever movie that was in. But anyway, that's externally. I suppose sport-wise, let me explain a couple of things. These are a little bit wider on the sport. These are 19s, aren't they? Yeah, they're 19s. 285 45s on the rear. And what are they, 265, I think, or 255 50s on the front. Basically, for those of you who never knew, see 255 50 ZR19s. Right, so what are these measurements? 19 is the width between, the distance between here and here, in other words, on the tyre. So basically, in other words, you've got to have 19-inch wheels, so that's the distance from there to there. So that's what that figure is. This figure here, it's so weird because that's in inches. This is in millimeters, and that's in percent. I mean, isn't that wonderful? It's like democratic way of satisfying everybody. But anyway, 255, that would be millimeters across here, across the width of the tyre. And then this figure is the percentage of this figure, so the percentage of that figure that is the sidewall. So basically you could probably work out the height, because these are a 50, so half of 255, so that's 127.5. that would be the measurement from here to here. Doesn't seem right to me. Maybe it's both of them added together or something, but it must be. Anyway, so that's basically what those figures are. And what that means is that if you go wider here, you have to go, if you go wider on this one, like the width, you have to go smaller on the percentage for the sidewall, because otherwise what happens, if you can imagine, if you went to, I don't know, 315/50s, these sidewalls would be higher, which would mean that for every turn of the engine, because of the rolling radius would be larger, you get more distance on your car, which knocks out the speedo. There's other reasons as well, but anyway, so it's usually find it's roughly, if I was to go to 305s, I'd probably go down to 35s, or I think the next size up are 20-inch ones with 315s. But you have to really reduce this, because what you're looking for is the height from here to here. It needs to be the same regardless of whether it's the width of the wheels here and the tyres just that much, or whether it's some old truck tyre where the wheel finishes here and all of this is sidewall. The height needs to be the same, which is in other words the same as the diameter, which is the same as the rolling radius. Otherwise it knocks out the speedo, and in the case of the four-wheel drive it can give put real stress on one or all of the 3 diffs that these have. So you don't want to do that, because that's money basically if you get that wrong. So much so that you have to, there will be people who say this is what I'm about to say is a nonsense, but their widely held opinion is that you have to replace the tyres on the same axle at the same time, so that the tread's the same, so that there isn't any difference in the height, because that causes problem with the diffs, with the rear diff. But there are other people who say do all 4 at the same time, but yeah, I doubt if there's a car on the road any older than 4 years that's had its all 4 tyres changed at the same time every time. Especially when I look at these front tyres, and they do seem to be wearing faster than the rears, which on a front wheel drive is very typical, but I didn't think so on, well, I know it's not on a rear wheel drive, but then this is 4-wheel drive, so maybe yeah, same sort of thing. The front's doing the steering and some of the grip as well. So anyway, I'm just rambling now, but that's the exterior of this car, and unfortunately for those of you who live in London, or actually live in the world, these are not ULEZ compliant. None of this shape are, not on the diesels. Petrols, yes. How ridiculous is that? You know, there's the petrol, you know, a V8, 4.5 litre V8, one of these will use probably twice as much fuel as this does, but you can roll that around the centre of London if you want without being charged. But this, If I go a few miles into London from where I live, it's £12.50 per day. Anyway, I'm not going to get political, but that's that. But they're not ULEZ. So if you don't live in a ULEZ zone, you're probably going to find plenty of these around. All over the next few months, and at really very good prices. But they'll bite you in other ways. These things, like I say, the tyres. There's all kinds of things on these, but they're a fantastic car, great family car. Yesterday I was out and about, did about 140 miles of motorway and motorway traffic, motorway no traffic, A roads, B roads, these little country lanes and floods and Lord knows what, and it was just a bunch of fun. That's why it's filthy now, but I think that's a good look for these. Anyway, so thanks a lot. That's my 2009 X5 35D M Sport Auto. Cheers guys.